let me know. But we are live. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fit Parent Project. How is it going? Today, I am joined with a like high-level motherfucker. I'm just going to open with that. We'll just open it with that. Like high-level motherfucker. It's funny because I told all my clients that we were going to be filming this episode today. And before I did, I was like, for those of you who don't know, this is Natasha Storm, just to introduce her. But I told my clients before we were going to record this episode, I was like, Natasha is the kind of person that when she talks, I shut the fuck up, I listen, and I take notes. And so if you guys are listening to this right now, just, maybe heed that advice that I give myself whenever Natasha speaks, because she is a powerful freaking leader. And she is also a mentor of mine in a lot of, areas of life and in my business. And I have the utmost respect for her. And so we'll just jump into this episode, because today we're going to be talking about multiple things, but big fish or small fish, big pond. And then the idea of like tenacity and 5 more minutes in the arena, just to kind of set the tone. So Natasha, go ahead and introduce yourself. Like, how's it going?
Yeah, dude, I'm so excited to be here. I'm super grateful to have the opportunity to just like have an open conversation and be able to provide value where I can, especially in the topics of like tenacity, especially when you're in like a community and those people who are probably listening are parents, they're part of a coaching program. Maybe they're looking to become part of something, and you're looking to expand your community in some capacity. And sometimes when we come into new spaces, it feels uncomfortable. I don't know anybody. I don't fit in. Other people don't look like me. They don't talk like me. I don't know how to navigate this space. So I'm excited to talk about that, because I feel like my life is an accumulation of always being the smallest fish in the biggest pond, and always seeking it out, always looking for it, and being able to speak to the power of just being willing to do it. So yeah, I'm excited. My name is Natasha Storm. For those of you who don't know who I am, I've been working with Austin now for quite some time. I've been one of his business mentors for a couple years. And I feel like we have a really close relationship, and I feel like our relationship is different. And I feel it's different because there's parts of you that I see that I think at times maybe you've fallen off track, or you've lost your way, or you've lost your certainty in yourself. And there's just like this connected part of me that's like, you're not allowed to quit. So I know I'm excited to be on this show and just speak honestly with you.
I love that you said that, because I feel like there's always that kind of like persona online. It's like, and I feel like I do a pretty damn good job of being like transparent and like open and honest about all like the struggles and shit I go through online, which I like being able to be authentic like that. But there's still that part of like, of me that like, not everybody gets to see, that is like kind of like more reserved for, close friends, family, mentors. And I feel like, you've seen me at my lowest, and it's one of those things where it's like, and you've helped pull me out of those places in the past. And I think that that's just one of those things where it's just like, I completely agree with, kind of having that like connection. It's just like, I don't know, whenever I think of like the people that I resonate with the most, and like the like, I don't know, like top like 3 people I respect the most, like you were at like the top of that list, like hands down every single time. It's like, who are the first people that come to my mind? It's like fucking Natasha, Brian. And yeah, it's just one of those things that I could not appreciate more about you being in my life and being a part of my life. And so, yeah, just a moment of gratitude for you before I guess we kind of jump into all this. And one thing that you mentioned though, kind of like living through that like lens of like seeking out that small fish, big pond, like ism, I feel like is something that I resonate a lot with too, because like for those of you guys that don't know, Natasha was in the mastermind, which is what I'm in right now. And at that time, like, whenever I first joined the mastermind, like I resonated with your story of feeling like that, small fish, big pond, like so damn much, because like I felt like, I was at the bottom of the freaking totem pole, like in terms of like, coming into that new environment that's like scary, that's like, intimidating, that's like you like, and that was back when the mastermind was like intense, like super intense, like it was like, throwing like just like go, and it's just like, you feel like you don't belong sometimes. And I feel like, hearing your story really helped me feel like, it's like, well, shit, like if she can do it, why can't I do it kind of mentality. And so like, do you feel like kind of like that, like whenever you were like coming into the mastermind and that small fish kind of big pond mentality, like what were your thoughts like coming into it? Like how did you, because I feel like a lot of people out there on their health and fitness journey right now feel like the small fish in the big pond that is their, you know, health and fitness journey, because this is something completely new to them. And so what are your thoughts on that, I guess?
Yeah, I think that small fish, big pond applies to so many arenas in our life. Like I think of like a health and fitness standpoint, and it's like you're not someone who's consistent with your training. You don't go to the gym because you're intimidated by all the people who like look physically fit in there. You don't feel like you belong. So you're the smallest fish in the biggest pond. You walk in there and these like super jacked dudes and these like super shredded women are in there,
Yeah.
and you're 20, 30 pounds overweight, like mom of 3 kids or like dad in his 40s. And you're like, yo, I haven't picked up a dumbbell in 20 years. Like I have no business being in this room.
Yeah.
And I think that keeps us stuck, because when did we decide that there was a hierarchy of worth?
Yeah.
Like,
I love that you said that.
yeah, and it is. And it's like this like preconceived idea that we have this like hierarchy of worth. Like this person is worth more than me because they look this way. This person has more value than me because they make more money than me. This person has more value and status than me because they're more well recognized in a community. Like we create this hierarchy of like, where do we fall on the hierarchy? And then if we don't think that we make even like baseline level, the average level, we're like, well, then I don't want to try. And that's what keeps people stuck. But your worth isn't, like, the way I see it, and what I've gone through is you just are more skilled than me.
Yeah. Ooh, that's such a good way. Yeah, that's it. Because I believe too, like everything is a habit and a skill. And it's like, because of that, it can be developed. And because of that, you can like hone that skill. And it's just like, you just don't have like the experience yet, but like lucky for fucking you, you're probably in a place where there's like, you know, a place to get that experience from. And I feel like so many people almost like count themselves out before they even start. And a lot of times, like, it's a whole kind of like mentality. It's like, you'll only go as far as you think you'll go. And like, a lot of times people just don't think they're going to go very far, or they like keep themselves as like, they're like, I'm a small fish. That's all I'll ever be. And there's no way that I'm going to, you know, reach that next level. And so like, I feel like sometimes, unfortunately, people either they like rise to that occasion, or they like rise to that waterline, or they kind of like silently see themselves out a lot of times, which is like unfortunate with a health and fitness journey, because it's like, you know, I mean, that who knows when the next opportunity will be created, or who knows when the next time they'll, you know, give themselves that chance to try again. When if they just would have been like, maybe like, you know, more kind to themselves, or talk to themselves in a more, or saw their own worth in a lot of ways, or at a higher level, then, you know, they would have taken advantage of that opportunity more. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people kind of go through that.
I agree. I live kind of by this analogy, and it's something that feels so embedded in me now that I don't think about it often. But like when I first started, like quite a few years ago, really living life on the edge of saying like, this is what I want and I'm going to go after it. I imagine people who are quote unquote more successful, or we perceive them to be of higher value or status in whatever area, as a room full of sober people. So you're coming into this space where you are this person who maybe you struggle with reaching your health and fitness goals, whatever it is. And you come into this space and you go to the gym, and it's like everybody in that room is sober and you're a drunk. For some reason, my screen is black.
I can still see you and hear you, so you're good.
All right, fuck it. So you come into this room, and it's like you're this drunk in a room of sober people, and one of two things happens. You're either going to get sober and match the standard of the room, or you will be so uncomfortable that you will leave. And you made a comment and you said some people silently check out and they leave the room that they're in, and they just stop communicating because they feel so much discomfort of what is happening in their life, instead of rising up to meet the occasion of where they're at. So whenever I've had situations in my life of feeling that I was a small fish in a big pond, it's like, I'm either going to meet the standard of the room or I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
But staying in the room is a choice. And I think that we leave the room because a lot of us can't stand discomfort.
Ooh, yeah. I love that you brought that up. I feel like, because I talk to my clients a lot of times, I talk about it a lot on here too. It's just like in order to like grow, like the reason why people are in the place that they're at right now is because they're in like a box of comfort. Like a lot of times they're in this like box of comfort, even though it's probably a really uncomfortable box to be in. It's just that they've acclimated to that box because that's the choices that they've been making on a daily basis. And then oftentimes they're just so stuck in that box, or they can't handle that feeling of discomfort, which I believe that that's where true growth occurs, because you're going to stay the same if you stay in that same fucking box doing the same shit you've always been doing. But like, if you can get outside of that box and get outside of the things that you've been doing on a daily basis that led you to be in a place where you're, you know, unhappy with where you're at, essentially, like if you can get outside of that and you can, you know, you find that true growth does occur outside of that comfort zone, or at least like, you know, riding that fine line a little bit outside of that box. I think that that's where, you know, people need to start at least before, yeah. Cause a lot of people, I mean, a lot of times people, I feel like they get almost like their system gets shocked almost too much. Like they try to do too much at once, or they try to get really uncomfortable really quickly, like, and maybe taking more of like a transitional, like, you know, phase might be better for them. And maybe it depends on the person, but I mean, that's just kind of what I've noticed.
Dude, I agree. I think that the average person really struggles with discomfort. Like, if it's not perfect, if it's not easy, if it's not simple, and if it hurts a little bit too much, more than what the pain I'm currently experiencing is, people cannot handle that. So when you come in to set a new goal and you try to achieve the next level and you try to do everything at once, dude, admit it, you cannot stand the discomfort of that much change, which is okay. So how can we do it in a way that you change one thing, where maybe you start going to the gym a small handful of times a week, but you're not tracking your food, eating a meal plan, working out 5, 6, 7 days a week, doing cardio, trying to get 10,000 steps. Like, you can't handle discomfort on a good day, homie.
Yeah, for real.
Let alone trying to like bring in all of this change at once. It's like the discomfort becomes so much that people panic because they can't stand the discomfort of what they're experiencing. And that a lot of times I think we have this preconceived idea that if it doesn't feel perfect right off the bat, then it isn't for me. Like our ability to handle discomfort and imperfection is like slim to none.
Yeah. It's crazy. And it's like, it's interesting. Like, cause I feel like, man, I feel like I was I was that way in other areas of my life, like up until I started becoming a part of, like, you know, like with working with you and Brian. And it's like, now I'm like, it's like I've trained myself. It's like kind of like what you talked about, like, just like I seek that shit now. If it makes me I was telling you before we even got on this like episode of the podcast, I was like, I'm a little, you know, I'm gonna be honest, like when I had Brian on, I wasn't that nervous, but like I was like, whenever I had you on, I was like, ooh, it makes me, I want this to be a good episode. I want to, you know, have that like that level of like quality to this episode, and just like, but I felt that discomfort. And I was like, oh, that means I gotta fucking do this. So I was like even asking you to be on this episode, I was like she's probably gonna say yes, potentially, I don't know, but at the end of the day, I was like, I need to, you know, ask. I need to do that. I need to, if it makes me uncomfortable, I need to use that as like a compass to guide me in the direction that I know I need to go in. And so, like, I think that like so many people, like you said, are just like, you know, they can't handle that discomfort. And so for you, how do you like to, like, I guess, like build up your tolerance to discomfort, or how have you in the past, how did you get okay with being uncomfortable?
Yeah. So I think that this goes back like probably to when I was like 21. So when I was 21, I remember leaving a relationship where I didn't speak my needs. Like I didn't ask for what I wanted. I wanted commitment. I wanted certain things, but I wasn't willing to be like, yo, this is what I want. And if you don't want to give it and we're not aligned, then I'm going to leave. So I really struggled to ask for that, which led to like a year of so much pain, not being willing to speak my own needs. So when I left, I was like, I want to master uncomfortable conversations. Like I'm making the commitment to myself that if I feel anxious, if something feels off, if I notice something, if I need to say something, like I'm committed to having that conversation within 24 hours. So that was like the first step into discomfort. So then anything that came up, that maybe somebody's facial expression changed in a conversation, maybe their tone of voice shifted, maybe they started texting me in a weird way. I was like, hey, like I noticed this thing and I don't really understand what it means, but can we open up and have a conversation about it? Which was so uncomfortable because people don't want to be that transparent, right? Like I wasn't living that way. It's like we're so used to ambivalence and not knowing where we stand with people that it's easier to live in ambivalence and discomfort than it is to be like, this is my truth. And your truth is so vulnerable because what if I tell you my truth and you reject me? And
Ooh,
I
yeah.
don't love myself enough yet to be okay with you rejecting me and realize that your rejection of me is actually a rejection of something in you.
Oof.
So
Wow.
that's where
Yeah.
it started.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh,
And then
that
it's
hit.
like I had so many reps of these like difficult conversations, but I
Mhm.
realized that every time I had them, I would feel lighter. I would feel
Mm.
better. It started getting easier. It was like that window of, okay, I need 24 hours to muster up the courage to do
Yeah.
this. Started getting shorter and shorter. And now it's as simple as like if you sent me a strange text right now, I'd be like, hey, something feels off. Like, I'm
Yeah.
an intuitive lady. Can we have a
Yeah.
conversation about this? And I would be okay even if you were uncomfortable with me asking that question.
Yeah.
So I think it's reps. It's like number one, the commitment to say, I am so goddamn tired of living this way right now that I'm willing to seek discomfort.
Mhm.
And I think the easiest place to build that muscle is in conversation. Like I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly do. I think it's like that applies to every area of your life because if you can
Mhm.
learn to look at someone and say, this is what I'm noticing, this is what
Mhm.
I need, can we have a conversation about it? Your whole life elevates because you'll
Yeah.
communicate with your coach, you'll
Mhm.
communicate with strangers, you'll communicate with your significant other, with people
Mhm.
you work with, like your children. I feel like
Mhm.
that's if I could
Yeah.
give somebody the power of, hey, you want to be more confident and like live a life that you actually feel like you're in the driver's seat of, learn to have uncomfortable
Mm.
conversations.
I love that. I love that. And I love that you mentioned too, it's like putting in the reps. Cause I mean, like we were just talking about, it's a skill. It's literally a skill. And it's something that you can learn how to be fucking better at by just like putting in those reps and having those, in this scenario, uncomfortable conversation. I feel like there's just like, there's so many kind of like universal like parallels to a lot of these things. Like, oh, if you can have an uncomfortable conversation, like, and work on that, you can be uncomfortable and be more okay with that, and being in the gym, or being in the
Yeah.
gym setting, or learning your nutrition, or being in a community with other people who are working towards similar goals. Like, even though you feel really uncomfortable right now, like,
Mhm.
guess what? All those motherfuckers in that group felt the same way probably at one point or another. Like,
Dude.
they put in the reps.
And here's like the kicker. Here's the coolest thing about these uncomfortable conversations. Once you start having them, you realize how much is in your head.
Yes, that's
And then
so true.
going to the gym no longer feels intimidating
Mm,
because you're like, every time that I've made an assumption
mm.
that somebody felt a certain way towards me, it had less to do with me and more to do with them.
Yeah. Oh, that is so true. And I feel like I mean, like everybody at one point or another has like a difficult conversation with like a client at some point or another. And oftentimes, like the times whenever I've been in my own head, I'm like, oh my gosh, like they probably hate me, or they probably like they don't, they're like, clearly they've been distant, so that means that they don't like me or something like that. It's like, and but in reality, they had like either a mental health emergency, or they had a death in the family, or something like that. And I was like, oh, like I was like so caught up in being worried about it being about me that I didn't even think about how it could be about them. And so those that happens all the time. And I tell my clients, like, whenever, because a lot of them have like gym anxiety or gym intimidation, and I'm like, you have no idea. Either everybody, like 99% of people in the gym are either focused on their own shit or just as in their own head as you are about this scenario. And I was like, you have nothing to like worry about. Like, and I even said it to my clients yesterday. I was like, people can barely remember what the fuck they had for breakfast yesterday, let alone what one random person that they don't even know in the gym like did something like maybe even a little bit off in terms of like an exercise or something like that. And it's just like, yeah, we put too
That
much about. Yeah, go ahead.
that filter though that people live through, it's like you're you're constantly looking at your worth outside yourself.
Yeah,
Like no one gives a fuck about you.
yeah. You're not
Like
that
that's
special.
the
You're not
truth.
that special. And it's a good thing. It's like, you're not
Yes.
that fucking
And
special.
it's not even intended to be rude. It's just like
Yeah,
people don't care. The first
yeah.
filter is this relevant to me? How does this impact me? And how do
Mm,
I feel about the
mm,
situation? Like that's
mm,
everyone's first filter. Nobody
mm.
cares about you
Yeah,
and what you're
yeah,
doing. And
yeah.
like when you realize that, oh my God, your life gets so much simpler.
Mm,
Even bringing it back to like having difficult conversations. Hey, I noticed there was a shift in energy. I feel like something is off between us. Yeah, you're right. I'm feeling weird about this. Like it's never you did this. It's
yeah.
like I feel this way and I don't
Mm,
know how to deal with it. So you go to the gym and someone's looking at you. It's like, man, they don't give a shit about you. If
Yeah.
anything, they're looking at you, and maybe you're doing something that is like super bold or out there. And if there's judgment, it's like, I would never give myself permission
Yeah.
to do that.
Ooh.
Like,
Yeah. Well, I feel like people like all the time, like any time somebody talks like shit online, like, I mean, we're out there on social media a lot. So like, we get haters sometimes, but it's one of those things like when somebody says something mean to me or something like that, I'm like, it doesn't bother me because I know it's like a reflection of they see something in me that they are probably lacking in their own life, and they see me as like a mirror to their lack of success, or in this scenario like boldness or whatever it
yeah,
may be. And so if like somebody's thinking negatively, or in the rare occasion
yeah,
that something does happen, it's like it's not even a thing against you. It's literally it's them. It's their like lack of confidence or their lack of security, and they're just like I think that a lot of times people you know I don't know take. And again, it does take building up that thick skin, I think sometimes, but it's
see,
people take things to heart too much too, I think sometimes.
I think it's less about building thick skin and it's
Mm.
more about building a relationship with yourself,
Ooh,
because
okay.
you
Yeah,
can't
that's true.
shame the shameless.
Mm.
You say something to
True.
me and you say something that's like intended to be super hurtful, and you were like, if you came at me and you were just like, you're a narcissist and you're unethical and you're like the least integral person that I know, like that would just fly right over my head, and I'd be like, nothing about that is my truth.
Mm.
However, if I was doing things behind the scene where I wasn't being ethical, where I wasn't telling the truth, where I wasn't embodying what I claim I embody, then
Mm.
yeah, I would feel super triggered. I'd be
Yeah.
like, you're calling something out in me.
Mm.
You can't shame the shameless.
Yeah.
So if somebody says something to you and it hurts and it bumps up into your shit and your heart rate starts to just go through the
Yeah.
roof, what a gift. That
Yeah.
person literally just pointed something out to you that you're not actually good within
Yeah.
yourself.
Mm.
So instead of
That's so
focusing
cool.
on them, what's coming up for you? Because
Mm.
if you were solid and you were actually embodying everything that you claimed,
Mm.
you wouldn't be triggered.
Yeah. I love that. That is so true. And I feel like a lot of it too comes down to like almost like introspection. I feel like a lot, I mean, anything when it comes to like self-development and like personal growth, I feel like a lot of it comes down to like recognizing that there's something there in the first place. Cause a lot of people are flying so blind, like in their own lives, like they don't know why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. They don't know, like they feel things and they're so reactive to those things that there's not even like, they don't even like check with themselves sometimes, where they're like responding instead of reacting. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like there's almost like a level of awareness, right? There's like different levels of awareness in somebody's like life. And I feel like some people, especially if you're like, you've never worked on yourself in these ways before, like you're kind of at like, whatever the first layer of awareness is, which is not a whole lot, right? And
Mhm.
so like as people start to kind of like work on themselves, they start to put the reps in these other areas of their life, like whether that's getting uncomfortable or whatever else it may be that's going to help them get towards their goals that they're striving towards. It's like every time you put in those reps, you just get a little bit closer to that next level of awareness. And sometimes I think that it does take getting like, put into an environment that you're not comfortable in to help you recognize those blind spots that you had. Because if you don't know what you don't know, I think a lot of times, there's a lot of people out there who don't know what they don't know. And unfortunately, sometimes that includes, like emotional regulation. It involves, introspection. It involves a lot of these things that like are tied to, making progress in life. Like at the end of the day, I feel like, people, they see a health and fitness journey and they're like, they focus a lot on just the physical, right? Because that's all people advertise and see, and that's what a lot of people see. But like the mindset shift, I think, is the most important thing that people have to go through in order to have a sustainable health and fitness journey, because your body's not going to do shit if your mindset's in a shitty fucking place. Like you're not going to grow
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to grow this or develop this if this is not growing and developing too.
Mm. I think as well, your body is a physical representation of where you're currently at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what you value, what you
Yeah.
embody, the habits that you have, also the
Mm.
beliefs that you have
Mm.
about yourself, right? Like if you're 300 pounds, you don't embody health. And
Yeah.
that's not saying that to be like rude or obnoxious. It's just like
Yeah.
your body is a physical representation of what's going on internally with you.
Yeah.
No different than your house. If
Yeah.
your house is chaotic and you got
Yep.
shit everywhere and it's super disorganized, like you're comfortable in the chaos. Like you can't
Mhm.
stand it being good. You can't stand it being organized and tidy. So what
Mhm.
is going on within you that is showing up outside of you? You
Mhm.
can't outrun yourself.
No. Oh, that's so true. That's so true. And like comfortable in the chaos, I think is something that like it kind of goes back to like, and people like hear this all the fucking time. It's like choose your hard, but like there is that there's a reason why it's been said so many fucking times is because there is an element of truth to it, and quite a bit of element of truth to it because like it's hard like you said, that comfort in the chaos. It's hard to live a life like that. It's hard to be in a house that's chaotic or in a body that's in pain or unhealthy. Like it's hard to do that, but we've become comfortable in that chaos. And I think a lot of times, and unfortunately, I feel like sometimes people have to, fly a little too close to the sun, or they have to kind of hit that like breaking point where they're like, they go to the doctor and they're like, your fucking liver's in like, it's in disarray. Like your heart health is like, you've got plaque building up, or your likelihood of having a heart attack in the next 5 years is like, crazy, or they have a parent die of something that's like weight related or whatever. And it's like sometimes people have to reach that, like, that almost like rock bottom breaking point, or that like crazy realization to be like to flip that switch and be like, I have to get uncomfortable with this new way of life, or this embodying some of these new ideas or new environments, because like I'm comfortable in this chaos and it's hard living this life. But people see like a health and fitness journey as being hard, but it's just a different type of hard. That you just have to get comfortable with that kind of chaos that's conducive to the success that you want to see in life, versus being comfortable in the chaos that's like causing you to be in like a not great position, I think. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that we can't read the label from inside the bottle. I
Mm,
think that when you are like, there's so much pain that people
mm,
experience, but they're submissive to the pain. So they've just like submitted to where they are. This is my body aches. It hurts. This is just what it's like. My knees hurt when I walk upstairs. I struggle to be out of breath. Okay, can we go play baseball? No, I'd rather go to the mall instead. Like you make decisions to keep yourself comfortable
yeah.
because you've just laid down where you
Mm,
are. So when you ask somebody to step up, the first little bit, it's like, it's hard. This isn't what I
mm,
do. This isn't my habits. This is like, they stay consistent for the first 2 to 3 weeks of a health and fitness journey. And then they're like, this is starting to hurt in other
yeah.
areas. Like my body isn't recovering. This is taking time from me. I don't have the time to meal prep. I don't have the time to track all my food. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, like the moment that somebody starts kicking and screaming
Mm,
during change is the moment that they're fighting reality and they refuse to take responsibility.
ooh,
Period.
yeah. Yeah. I feel
Mm.
like, I mean, we see that. That is so true. And I feel like we see that a lot. Like, I mean, because you used to do, fitness coaching as well. And it's like, I've noticed like, there's kind of like after that first, like, 2 to 4 weeks, or sometimes 4 to 6 weeks after the honeymoon period is worn off and they've gotten out of that, like, it's like, oh, fuck, like this isn't just something that's fun and exciting and shiny and new. This is
I
something
have to
that
be
I'm like,
disciplined.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like there's always like this, like ultimate moment when somebody is like at that point where they are either going to quit, or they're going to pull themselves through with that discipline, or even with maybe, and I think that's honestly sometimes when mentorship and having a coach can really fucking make a big difference, is like, if they're able to help kind of pull them through that moment or talk them through that moment, because it's like, hey, all these other motherfuckers that are successful out there in their health and fitness journeys, they all went through a point in their journey like this, and
Mhm.
they pulled themselves through, and recognizing that like we all felt like that probably at one point or another in our health and fitness journey, but we just lasted, again, great transition here, 5 more minutes in the arena, right?
Yeah.
Just taking that 5 more minutes in that arena, and just I don't have to do this for the rest of my fucking life. I just have to do this for 5 more minutes. And after I do
Yeah.
that 5 minutes, I just have to do five more. And if they can do that and get themselves in that mentality, and and maybe have somebody to help recognize that and pull them through a little bit more too, tell them it's okay. Like, they break through that moment, that kind of ultimate moment, and they end up, making it a lifestyle. They end up doing it for the long haul, versus the person that just hit that wall of discomfort and they're like, they just kind of like, maybe this isn't for me, or I quit, or they fall off. When if they would have just done it for 5 more minutes, they would have had a completely different trajectory that their life would have been taken into. And it's just like, if people just knew that like 5 minutes could make the fucking difference in having a, like, you know, a fulfilled, happy, healthy life, if they could just make that 5 more minutes happen for themselves, like, I think if more people recognize that they'd be more likely to do it. But when you're in that pain, when you're in that discomfort, it can be hard to see outside of that and see that, like, that perspective, I think. But yeah, so
yeah, 5 more minutes in the arena.
That resonates with me big time, because that was a piece of advice that you gave to me whenever I was like, fuck, I don't know if I can do this shit. Damn, like, I'm in a really low place right now. Like, damn, like, you know, because like I was having all my mental health shit and stuff like that, which, you know, and Natasha, like, in that moment, because I was like, man, like, am I cut out for this? Like, I see all these other people who, you know, like, don't seem to be having the problems that I'm having, or I see all these people who are at a higher, you know, level than me right now. And like, I feel like, you know, I was starting to get that small fish-ism that was like flaring up in me, that instead of it being like, you know, I'm a small fish and I'm going to prove myself that I'm a big fish and I'm going to work my way up, I started kind of like almost like sinking into my like small fishism, because I was in pain, and because I was like, I didn't have clarity, and because I was just in this, like, you know, negative place in my life, which I feel like, you know, at one point or another, everybody goes through seasons of that, or like, or periods of that. But having you tell me that, you know, just 5 more minutes in the arena, like, made me realize, okay, like, I can fucking do this. Like, I just need to, like, you know, keep showing up. And we got through it. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about 5 more minutes in the arena, like that kind of mentality? Yeah,
absolutely. So like, I've been through many events in my life where I didn't get the results I wanted in the time period that I was hoping or expecting to get them by. And I think for me, I would come to these like absolute threshold moments where you're like max capacity, like you're working so hard, you haven't broke through, you're doing all the things. And like, there's 2 parts to this. It's like, you're living in this place where you're working really hard, you're being disciplined, you're doing the steps you need to, but you're still giving it 70%. So you're giving it like 70%, and you've convinced yourself that it's 100, but you're getting 70% results. So you're burnt out, you're overwhelmed, you're pissed off, you're frustrated. Why isn't this working? It's not working for me. And then there's this resistance, and there's this tension, and it's like entitlement.
Yeah. Oh, that is so. I love that you said that. Entitlement is such a good way to put it. Oh,
so it's like, I'm giving 70% effort, expecting 100% results. And the worst thing about 70% effort is when you're giving 50%, you're aware of it. You're like, I'm literally doing half of what I'm supposed to, and I'm okay with not getting results because I know I'm not putting in the work.
Yeah.
0 and 50, people are cool with, because they can take responsibility for it. 70 is like, I'm trying more than I was before, but not actually enough to get a result. And it creates this false perception that you're actually trying. So we get into that place and we get overwhelmed and frustrated, and then we want to quit. And then that's where like the narrative and the kicking and the screaming and the story comes up. And it's just like, why isn't this working for me? And it's working for everybody else. And it's like, dude, 5 more minutes in the arena and actually give it 100. Like, if you do that, you will break through, because the difference between that like 70 to 100 is like a 2 millimeter shift.
Yep.
But when you're in it, you create this story, and you kick and scream and you fight, and this is too much, and I don't want to do this, and it's taking all my time, and blah, 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 blah. And you just like, you get emotionally charged and high off your own like resistance to doing what is required to get the actual goal. So I've had that so many times in my life where I've been like kicking and screaming, and I'm just like, why is this not working for me? And it's like, because I was about 2 millimeters short of what I needed to do, which was, I was sleeping in. I did 80% of my tasks for the day. I tracked my macros to 80%. I did 3 out of my 4 workouts for the week. Dude, get your ass in the fucking arena and do what's required of you if you want to get the outcome. And you do that enough times, and it never goes away. Like, I think there's levels to it. There's certain things now that I would just do religiously that I don't miss on, but there's still other areas of my life where I am 2 millimeters short of where I need to be, and I don't get those results. So I think planting the seed for people listening to this, you're not perfect. You're never going to be. You're going to have seasons where you fucking crush and you're super aligned with what you're doing and you're all gas, no brakes. And then you're going to have another area that comes up, whether it's in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years from now, where you get to have this conversation with yourself again.
Yeah.
Because you grow and you evolve and you grow and you stabilize. And that's just like part of life. I'm still having those conversations with myself. I had a conversation with myself last night about 5 more minutes in the arena. Been traveling too long. Been burnt out. I want to come home and just be in my space. And I was just bawling in a parking lot because and I was like, but I had stuff that I needed to get done yesterday in order for today to be successful. And I was like, man, 5 more minutes in the arena. I see you. You're upset right now. And you also need to finish this because you have something that you got to do tomorrow at 11 and it needs to be done before then.
Yeah, absolutely. That freaking hits. I love that. Thank you for kind of like diving into that. I feel like for me, I feel like oftentimes I feel like you said, people kind of get like almost like high off of their own like resistance to things. And it's just like, I feel like, you know, if they had these getting in the habit of having these conversations with ourselves, like of, you know, like 5 more minutes in the arena, am I showing up as much as I, you know, actually am showing up, like, and having that open and honest conversation with yourself is such an important, it's almost kind of like almost like a self kind of like review, like on a like, you know, on like every, like, I don't know, monthly or 6-month or yearly basis, whatever. It's almost kind of like checking in with yourself and being like, hey, like, you know, why am I feeling resistance to this? Like, why do I feel like I'm not actually, like, you know, getting the results that I want to get? Is it, you know, and I mean, 99% of the time or 100% of the time, it's like a lack of effort, but it's like, why is that lack of effort happening? And I think just getting to like the source of what's going on and getting to the source of, you know, of why you're like, you know, like living in this resistance, basically, like what is, like, identifying that is like the first kind of like step to like being able to actually fucking change something about it in the first place. So
seek truth. Am I being honest right now? A lot of people don't want to be honest.
No.
It's like, and that's why people have resistance to tracking stuff. They have resistance to tracking their macros in MyFitnessPal. They have resistance to tracking their workouts. They have resistance to tracking their steps. I don't want to do this. This is time consuming. No, you just don't want to be fucking responsible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because data doesn't lie and numbers don't lie. And if I looked at your month on a calendar and you only have 10 days out of the 30 crossed out that you actually won your day and you were successful, you would be forced to look at yourself, do a self-assessment and say, I'm not showing up to the capacity that I want to. So I would rather be irresponsible and not track my information and then say, this isn't fair. This isn't working for me. This isn't what I wanted. It's like, no, you're not fucking working. Which is the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think like, just to like, I kind of tell a story about that. I guess like I've had clients in the past, and and you know, no one in particular, but like I've worked with a couple of people in the past that, you know, they, after we worked together for like over a year, and like they just weren't seeing the results that they wanted to see, they checked back in with me, you know, after like 3 to 6 months after we stopped working together, and they sent me a message like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, it wasn't you or the program that was not working. I had some internal shit that I was dealing with on my own, and I was binge eating, or I was just not, you know, they just weren't being honest with themselves. And when it was going on, it was like, you know, sometimes we doubt ourselves, like as coaches and leaders. It's like, why is this person getting the results? Am I fucking up in some way? I always try to like reflect internally. It's like, where am I messing up first and foremost? And then after that had happened, I was like, man, that makes so much sense. But it's so I talk about this story just because if I had, you know, for any of my clients out there that are listening to this right now, or anybody who's on their, you know, about to pursue or is pursuing their own health and fitness journey, like be fucking honest with yourself. Like no matter how much it fucking hurts or how uncomfortable it feels to like tell somebody that you fucking binge ate like 4 days in a row, like no matter how, like if you want to truly grow and get the results that you want to fucking get, like you have to be like, there has to be like that high level of like honesty and just like owning your truth, like to work through it, I guess, in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, man, that shit's, yeah.
I have one last thing to like wrap up on my end that I think would be highly beneficial to those listening. I think it's as simple as asking yourself is, am I being responsible for what I say I want? Like, is this responsible? Am I starting and ending with responsibility? Because starting with responsibility is like, I just binge ate for 4 days. The responsible thing to do is to tell my coach that.
Yeah.
In my check-in.
Yeah.
Like it's as simple as that. Every area of your life that you are not seeing the results you want right now is because you are dodging responsibility.
Ooh, yes. Yeah. Yeah,
The
that's
end.
true. Yeah. I mean, anytime I've ever like not seen progress in one area of my life, like whenever I checked in with myself and it was just like, am I like showing up at the capacity that I know I'm supposed to be showing up at? And guess what? It fucking wasn't. Like for what, at the end of the day, maybe it wasn't my fault or maybe it's not somebody's fault that it's happening, but at the end of the day, it's your fucking responsibility to be proactive in those areas of your life. Like, and work on it and get yourself out of that, like, situation so you can start to grow again.
100%.
So yeah, well, let's fucking go. I appreciate you being on here.
Always.
Any last any last words or anything like that, like that you, if like a golden nugget of advice to anybody who is in that arena right now or is feeling like a small fish in a big pond right now? What would you say?
It's not about other people. Like use all those moments of discomfort as your like flashing sign on the road that's like there's growth here. Like be willing to go through it because the arenas never go away.
Yeah.
Being in uncomfortable situations never go away. The only thing you can do is the more you embody responsibility, the more you show up for yourself and you are willing to push yourself into the discomfort, the easier those situations get and your turnaround time in new arenas gets shorter and shorter. But you can never get to the point that that window of discomfort shortens if you aren't willing to go through the initial uncomfortability of learning that skill set. Period. And you can't fucking dodge the process. Like you just have to do it and feel your way through it.
Yes, fucking period. Let's go. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom. And I hope everybody took some fucking notes because, like I said, when Natasha speaks, I shut the fuck up, I listen, and I write down whatever the fuck she's telling me to do. So, on that note, where can they find you before we end this episode?
Yeah, if they want to follow me on social media, you can follow me on Instagram at Natasha Storm _. I also have a podcast. It's lots of it is like heavily business related, but there's also a lot of like healing and personal development stuff in there, which there's some good bangers if you're interested in like doing some deep work on yourself. And it's called Get Woke or Stay Broke. And you can find it on either iTunes or Spotify. It's
a great fucking podcast for those of you guys that are listening to this right now. Like I listened to an episode this morning on my way to the gym just because I was like, I mean, you know how I fucking love business, but also just like that deep work and just like, every time I listen to one of your episodes, I'm just like, man, like that shit hits, man. I got a great takeaway from this. So definitely check it out, guys. And definitely check her out on social media. She's fucking badass. So yeah, we'll end it on that note. Let's end it on that note. So other than that, I'll talk to you guys later and see you in the next episode. Bye.